Away we go. All right, prophecy, key to the future. We're on chapter 3. This one is God will pour out his judgments. So the first chapter was about wars, second was about spreading the gospel, and basically both of those two intermixed. And it continues to seem like they're going to just keep going with prophecies that I think a lot of these prophecies are going to intermix. So I'm grateful how they've put things out in this kind of timeline that they think they have. And my mind is firing on all cylinders because I can't keep my mouth shut with how much I'm just enjoying this and trying to figure out, well, how far are we down the road on all these? Because it seems like we're down the road on quite a few of them. All right. Great calamities are to come after this gospel is taken from the Gentiles. It was on the night of September 21st, 1823, that the prophet Joseph Smith was first visited by Moroni, an angelic being. Moroni told Joseph many important truths during his 3 visits that night. Among the most significant of his statements was the following warning, which the prophet recorded, quote, "He informed me of great judgments which were coming upon the earth, with great desolations by famine, sword, and pestilence, and that these grievous judgments would come on the earth in this generation." Similar warnings had been given by the Lord repeatedly while he was still on the earth. He foretold to his apostles the events which would come to pass in the last days. Quote, "Behold, I speak for mine elect's sake. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places." Unquote. Modern-day revelations have indicated the time when judgments caused by these elements will begin to take their toll. Although earthquakes, tidal waves, great storms, and other calamities have been increasing in number over the years, I don't know about that. Sorry. It's just our awareness of them has gone up because now we have a global way of recording it. But I'd love to see. Yet the time of the full onslaught of these disasters is to be the period after the time of the Gentiles had been fulfilled. The Lord made this clear in section 88 of the Doctrine and Covenants when he told how the saints are, quote, "to go forth among the Gentiles for the last time, as many as the mouth of the Lord shall name, to bind up the law and seal up the testimony, and prepare the saints for the hour of judgment which is to come." It's 88-84 if you need. "Then he proclaimed that after your testimony cometh wrath and indignation upon the people." Also, D&C 88. "What calamities did the Lord say would come upon the earth in this period? Quote, for after your testimony cometh the testimony of earthquakes, and that shall cause groanings in the midst of her. And men shall fall upon the ground and shall not be able to stand. And also cometh the testimony of the voice of thunderings, and the voice of lightnings, and the voice of tempests, and the voice of waves of the sea heaving themselves beyond their bounds. And all things shall be in commotion, and surely men's hearts shall fail them. For fear shall come upon all people." All of that in the same chapter. Nephi, the great Book of Mormon prophet, foresaw the wickedness. Well, sorry, Yeah, okay, so again, I'm thinking we've already had a bunch of earthquakes. I mean, even in this last year, in 2025, there's been an increase in activity along what's called the Ring of Fire. All these volcanoes have started going off that you could say it was a bit more activity, but how statistically significant that is, don't know. So again, when you're dealing with prophecy, this is the problem, is that you strain to see, is it already happening or is this going to be something to come? Because if it's already happening, then you don't want to miss the boat because you're like, oh wait, we're already at this point. On the other hand, if you think it's still to come and you're anticipating something worse, but it's not, and then suddenly things are happening where it's like, wait, we never got to this point, so why are we now at this point? Or you just miss it altogether. Because that's the weird thing, is like, how many people will recognize it versus how many don't? Because there's plenty of people who've been told these exact same things from the Bible, but you get the sense that they aren't going to get it. Well, at the same time, there's a lot of people who say they read the Bible and they really don't. They only read what supports what they want to hear. So that goes for anyone in and outside the church. So it's important to read the whole thing. Anyway, but let's continue. Nephi's brother Jacob also foresaw this period of destruction and said that it would come when, quote, the Messiah will set himself again the second time to recover his people out of Israel. That's 2 Nephi 27 for that quote. His people to recover his people of Israel, who still wait for the coming of the Messiah. And I was seen in the preceding chapter, the major gathering of Israel will come after the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled, or in time spoken of by Nephi above. Jacob's prophecy was similar to his brother's. And they that believe, quote, and they that believe not in him shall be destroyed, both by fire, and by tempest, and by earthquake, and by bloodshed, and by pestilence, and by famine. Part of the message of the prophecy on war is that beginning in the period after the slaves have risen against their masters throughout the world, quote, with the sword and by bloodshed the inhabitants of the earth shall mourn, with famine, with plague, and earthquake, and thunder of heaven, and the fierce and vivid lightning also. And shall the inhabitants of the earth be made to feel the wrath and indignation and chastening hand of the Almighty God, until the consumption decree hath made a full end of all nations. So, this is weird because, again, I'm sitting here thinking that, well, we've had famine throughout time, especially whenever there's been war, there's famine, because the people who grow the food can't grow the food, or their fields become the battlegrounds. Just look at what's happened in Ukraine. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and they have to cross these farmers' fields. The farmers' fields then become minefields. It's just horrific and terrible, and almost every war this kind of thing happens, that these fights will occur in cities, these fights will occur in the fields, and the farmers can't get what they need, then people starve, or just look at these other revolutions. You go to any despotic nation, whether it's when there was communist overthrow in Russia, or whether it was communist overthrow in China, there was a period where millions of people died because of that overthrow, and because they wanted to oust those who didn't believe in the cause. And frankly, that was even worse than what the wars were doing. It was horrific. And so I sit here and think, well, we've got famine and plague. What do you think the Spanish flu or other things were during World War II and I? We've got earthquakes and thunders of heaven, although how strong compared to what they were thinking of? Remember, for these people, it was pretty random and very rare. For us, we have a global network of seeing these earthquakes, and there are places that are much more prone than others. I mean, look at Japan. So, okay. These are things that could be God calling everyone out, and they've already been happening. The one part at the end, which is consumption of the end of all nations, that is the different part. So, is it all those in conjunction with the end of all nations, or have we already had all that, and now we just need to finish going through the last part, which ends all nations? That's what I'm talking about, right? Thus, the period of the great and natural disasters and calamities is identified as being after the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled, and during the period of wars of total destruction. President Brigham Young warned of the calamities which nature would hold for the world in this period. You can see why they put it there, and I understand it, but I'm just saying, kind of question the assumption, just in case. But they put it squarely after the end of the Gentiles, and maybe that will be the case. When the testimony of the elders ceases to be given, and the Lord says to them, this is a quote by Brigham Young, by the way, "Come home, I will now preach my own sermons to the nations of the earth. All you now know can scarcely be called a preface to the sermon that will be preached with fire and sword and tempests and earthquakes, hail, rain, thunders and lightnings, and fearful destruction. What matters of destruction? Of a few railway cars. You will hear of magnificent cities now idolized by the people, sinking in the earth, entombing the inhabitants. The sea will have itself, heave itself beyond its bounds, engulfing mighty cities. Famine will spread over the nations, and nation will rise up against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and states against states, in our own country and in foreign lands, and they will destroy each other, caring not for the blood and lives of their neighbors, of their families, or for their own lives. The Lord's desolating scourge. So, I guess we've got to wait for the time when we have to bring back missionaries. Did we have to do that during World War II? See what I'm saying? There's always just a little bit of like, I don't know. But World War II, we didn't have missionaries in Russia. We've already had missionaries in Russia. So, I guess we shall see. I'm trying not to confuse you, but at the same time, I want to be critical of assumptions, so that way, we're not caught unawares. Because I could sit there and say, sounds like we're farther down when we are. Although how they present it, they make it seem like it's going to be very clear, like this. But when you're dealing with prophecy, this is why you go to the Lord. He'll let you know. All right. The Lord's desolating scourge. Of special note is the series of prophecies which deal with a terrible sickness which God will pour out upon the earth during this period. And after telling the times of the Gentiles and stating that they will turn their hearts from him because of the precepts of men, the Lord said, in that generation shall the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Quote, that is part of the quote. And there shall be men standing in that generation that shall not pass until they shall see an overflowing scourge, for a desolating sickness shall cover the land. But my disciples shall stand in holy places and shall not be moved. But among the wicked men shall lift up their voices and curse God and die. And there shall be earthquakes also in diverse places, and many desolations. Yet men will harden their hearts against me, and they will take up the sword one against another, and they will kill one another. Even before the church was organized, the Savior proclaimed that the testimony of 3 witnesses would go forth and would for the condemnation of this generation if they rejected it. Then he said what the condemnation would embrace. Quote, for a desolating scourge shall go forth among the inhabitants of the earth, and shall continue to be poured out from time to time, if they repent not, until the earth is empty, and the inhabitants thereof are consumed away and utterly destroyed by the brightness of my coming. That's Doctrine and Covenants 5, by the way. The former quote was Doctrine and Covenants 45. So, yeah, desolating scourge. They're taking it to show, I'm taking it that they're trying to show it as a type of disease. The desolating scourge could be all sorts of different things. From the earthquakes and famines and war, because that can be poured out several times, or at times as they reject it. So, I'm remembering this YouTube channel that was showing quotes from prophets. One of them during the 1960s had a truly terrible vision about war, and that there was somebody, he saw this terrible thing where everyone was, there was some sort of sickness that was so bad that someone who came out of their shelter went to try and take advantage of someone who had dropped dead in the street, and take that to mean however you want. And they did so, and even as they were heading back to their shelter, they just fell over and died, that kind of stuff. So is it going to be something like that? Question is it going to be biological? Is it going to be bioweapon? Is it going to be nuclear? You can speculate all you want, But notice that he coupled that with the those who are righteous will stand, my disciples shall stand in holy places and shall not be moved. I mean, it's going to affect people, absolutely. But if the saints stay with God, it sounds like they should be okay. But what kind of things differentiates like that? You can spend all sorts of time speculating on it. But again, the scourging desolation could be more than just what they're making it out to be. Sorry. Let's keep going, though. I hope this interjection and well, it could be this, it could be this, helps calm nerves, and most importantly, gives you leeway to say, okay, maybe I should figure this out with the Lord. And again, remember, as long as you're following what the Lord wants, you're in the right spot. All right. In 1832, the Lord gave the warning that, this is from Isaiah 18, I, the Almighty, have laid my hands upon the nations to scourge them for their wickedness, and plagues shall go forth, and they shall not be taken from the earth until I have completed my work, which shall be cut short in righteousness. Oh, sorry, that's Doctrine and Covenants 84. A prophecy in Isaiah has been interpreted by various general authorities of the LDS Church as having reference to a future calamity in the Americas. The population is compared to a grapevine, and the prediction is made by God that God will, quote, both cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks, and take away and cut down the branches, that they be left together unto the fowls of the mountains, and to the beasts of the earth, and the fowls shall summer upon them, and all the beasts of the earth shall winter upon them. It's Isaiah 18. The time of this event is identified as following the fulfilling the times of the Gentiles, for it was written when Israel, and possibly the reference refers to the return of the 10 tribes, is gathered in. Further in the same chapter of Isaiah, quote, in that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts, of a people scattered and peeled, and from a people terrible, from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out, and trodden under foot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion. Orson Pratt spoke on this prophecy and clearly interpreted it as referring to a future destruction in America. He said that God will visit the American continents, quote, with judgments that are terribly severe, that will cause them to lie by hundreds and thousands, unburied, from one end of the land to the other, to be meat for the fowls of the air and the beasts of the earth. Why? Because the judgments will be swift, giving no time for burial. Inquires one, do you really believe that such judgments are coming upon our nation? I do not merely believe, but I know it. See Journal of Discourses on that. There's 2 kind of quotes in there. So, to me, I find it interesting because, sorry, I've got a little knock at my door here from the cat. Stop locking yourself in, you goofball. All right. But to me, it's fascinating that that's happened before in the Book of Mormon. So, not something to look forward to, but oh well. Anyway. This scourge was expected to come in some measure upon the saints if they are not righteous, as well as the Gentiles. Revelation given in 8. So that one is if they were not righteous. Again, I don't know specifically how terrible it was during what we called the Spanish flu, which, sorry about that. The Spanish flu was really, really bad. Scourge, let me put it that way. I don't know how bad, if it was this bad as they describe, but there you go. A revelation given in 1832 stated that vanity and unbelief have brought the whole church under condemnation, and that they shall remain under this condemnation until they repent. Otherwise there remaineth a scourge and a judgment to be poured out upon the children of Zion. That's from Doctrine and Covenants 84. A revelation given the following year said, quote, the Lord's scourge shall pass over by night and by day, and the report thereof shall vex all people. Yea, it shall not be stayed until the Lord come. For the indignation of the Lord is kindled against their abominations, and all their wicked works. Nevertheless, Zion shall escape if she observe to do all things whatsoever I have commanded her. But if she observe not to do whatsoever I have commanded her, I will visit her according to all her works, with sore affliction, with pestilence, with plague, with sword, with vengeance, with devouring fire. See, this is why I say, when they do a little poll on the internet from Ether's Elephant, can the church go into apostasy? And I'm like, do you guys not read the scriptures? To me, it's not like the entirety of the church. To me, I think about it as the individuals. I think there can be a lot of individuals that are not doing what they need to do. And we see that all throughout time, and I do not want to ever think that I'm an exception. The prophet Joseph taught that many of the saints, even though they are righteous, may fall prey to the disease and pestilence which are predicted. Quote, explained concerning the coming of man also that it is a false idea that the saints will escape all the judgments, whilst the wicked suffer. For all flesh is subject to suffer, and the righteous shall hardly escape. Still, many of the saints will escape, for the just shall live by faith. Yet many of the righteous shall fall prey to disease, to pestilence, etc., by reason of the weakness of flesh, and yet be saved in the kingdom of God. So that it is an unhallowed principle to say that such and such have transgressed because they have been preyed upon by disease or death. For all flesh is subject to death, and the Savior has said, judge not, lest ye be judged. That comes from History of the Church. So, and that's my point, is you don't want to sit there and judge and sit there and say, well, the Joneses down the street, they got that sickness, so they must not have been as righteous as we are. Not how it's going to happen. I think, like I said, in the Spanish flu, there was a lot of people that died, and including members of the church. But at the same time, that doesn't necessitate that they were bad or evil. It just means that they were subject to it. It was time for them, because no matter if you're righteous, no matter what happens, if you survive, great. If you don't survive, great. You're done with your worries and cares, and you can work on preaching the gospel on the other side. If you get to survive, there's a lot more to do, and time to rise up to the challenge. So, that's the way it goes. Famine, drought, and pollution. Closely connected with the coming danger of disease and pestilence is the great danger from famine. In addition to the many prophetic warnings of famine already cited in this chapter, several passages call to mind ways in which the Lord may cause famine to come upon the people of the world. The prophecy is given in the Doctrine and Covenants of an important event which is yet future. It will take place at an unspecified time before the coming of the Lord. The Lord proclaimed that, quote, there shall be a great hailstorm sent forth to destroy the crops of the earth. That's Doctrine and Covenants 29. Perhaps it was this revelation which influenced the prayer offered by the prophet Joseph Smith as he dedicated the Kirtland Temple. While speaking of the unrepentant among those who are enemies of the church, he asked the Lord that their works may be brought to naught and be swept away by the hail and by the judgments which thou wilt send upon them in thine anger. Doctrine and Covenants 109. Another way in which the Lord may send famines upon the land is by changing the seasons. While replying to the prophet's despairing prayer which he offered while he was a prisoner in Liberty Jail, the Lord revealed that, quote, God hath set his hand to seal, to change the times and seasons, and to bind their minds, that they may not understand his marvelous workings. that he may prove them also and take them in their own craftiness. Doctrine and Covenants 121. He changed the times and seasons. I understand where they're grabbing that from. I can see how that can apply because, for example, this year, wherever there is tons of snow elsewhere in the world, they seem to have taken it from Utah. So both Kamchatka as well as the eastern United States, they get record snowfall, and here in Utah we have nothing. It would be easy to see that, the Lord could make winter extremely mild all over the world. He could also make summertime very cold, as he has in the past through different natural disasters. So, I don't know. It could be talking about that. It could also be talking about he's changing the time frame that he's working with them. It's a little ambiguous. I understand why they're grabbing at that one, but we'll see. Let's continue. If there's more about this, then okay. But perhaps the greatest threat, as possible, caused of famine, is the danger from drought. The Lord also warns that drought can play an important part in the events of the last days. Quote, "Behold, at my rebuke I dry up the sea. I make the rivers a wilderness, their fish stink and die for thirst. I clothe the heavens with blackness and make sackcloth their covering. And this ye shall have of my hand. Ye shall lie down in sorrow." That's Doctrine and Covenants 133. The problem of water shortage in the United States has long been critical. President Kennedy, just previous to his inauguration, said, quote, "In 15 years, we will need twice as much water as we do now. Today, 40 million Americans are on the edge of a serious water shortage, and water tables are falling almost everywhere. Today, nearly every major waterway in the United States is polluted." That's This Week magazine, January 1961. 35 years later, the problems of water scarcity and water pollution have achieved even more serious global proportions. A 1994 article, Commonweal, summarizes the global situation. Quote, "More than 233 million people in 26 countries already live what the World Resources Institute designates as water-scarce nations. These millions are dropped in a bucket compared to those who will face lifelong water shortages in the next century, not to mention those who already suffer a lifetime of disease because they rely on polluted and impure sources of water now. Of the Earth's present 5.6 billion people, 1.2 billion lack access to potable water. The causes are many, including massive failures of governance. But the consequences are staggering. 80% of all disease in developing countries are related to tainted water." The Big Thirst, Commonweal, March 25th, 1994. The article focuses on the shrinking per capita water supply during the next 3 decades as the population swells. Again, there's lies, darn lies, and statistics. Now, thankfully they were using per capita, but at the same time, we are now comparing from what Kennedy was saying to a global, which is totally different. And also on top of that, you've noticed there's been tons of charities. When they talk about developing nations, a lot of them were probably thinking of all sorts. If you include the entire world, there's a lot more to look at. Okay, so think of all the times where they're doing charities to get clean water in villages and places in Africa. Any developing nation can be around the world, like South America, and also a lot of places like Philippines, Thailand, all the ones that are in drought-prone areas. This is going to be the Middle East areas and countries. And what is weird to me is all the people that build in the desert, whether it's Arizona or Dubai or other places like that. You're just like, what is wrong? Okay, fine, And yeah, we have been seeing a lot more drought. Take the Western United States. Take this year. We're not getting much snow in the mountains here. The Great Salt Lake is not exactly as deep as it used to be. And so there's a lot of this stuff that's going around, but the other problem is I don't think people are going to see it that way because we adapt. Like I said, you go to Dubai, it's this massively hot, arid desert, yet they've got all the greatest amenities, they've got the best buildings, best air conditioning. They have literally an indoor ski slope. It's insanely, it's just crazy. So, it's, to me, fascinating that here God is going to pour out all this stuff, but I think for the most part, we haven't been noticing, or what we have noticed, it's like our own fault, or we can just dig deeper, or we can desalinate and other things like that. But I think there will come a time where maybe that stuff breaks down. For example, the polluted water, thankfully, a lot of this has been, again, remedied by technology. Whenever someone fear mongers about, we're all going to die because we don't have enough food, then we figure out how to grow food better. Or we just make more of it. Or, we adapt. So I'm always cautious about fear mongering along these lines. And same thing with water. We learn to purify water here. We have water purification plants that are amazing. But I'll tell you what, if infrastructure starts to fail because of war and other things like that, that will be a major issue. That spreads disease. Because when we're no longer able to purify our water, then it becomes waste hazards, it becomes diseased, it becomes nasty, all sorts of problems. But I will also say that there's all sorts, in places like India, the Ganges River is a holy river, completely nasty and polluted, but it's an extremely holy site. And there's other places in the whole Indonesian area where there are places where there are rivers of plastic that go out to sea. Everyone loves to blame the United States, but the fact of the matter is, it's these developing countries that have not implemented the same standard of sanitation. That's where a big, huge issue lies. All right. So there's my aside on that. But they're not wrong, but just understand the specifics of it. Because how can I sit here objectively going, yeah, it's so terrible, when it's like, okay, yeah, we've got problems here, but we've been adapting to them. Yes, I think there's all these issues, but we can overcome. So we don't feel it as much. All right. That article focused on the shrinking per capita water supply as the population swells. Okay, quote, by the year 2030, the world's population is projected to grow to 8.9 billion. Recall that Earth's population at the beginning of this century was but 1.6 billion. While the need for water varies depending on climate, culture, and level of development, the amount of water available worldwide will not be increasing appreciably over present supplies. By 2030, the amount of water available per person worldwide will have shrunk to less than 2/3 of what it is today. That doesn't mean all will be affected the same way. Yes, but the big thirst will be here. Okay, then there's problems with population statistics because we've been assuming that it is so hard to get an accurate count because of everything that's happening. Plus, take some of the largest countries like China and India, and by population. How accurate can they be? India, I don't know. I don't know their culture, I don't know their infrastructure, but China. They've had a one-child policy for how long? And yet they continued to say their population is growing and on track for all these statistics. We know that China, because of the communist roots, and no one wants to say no to their upper people, are they even able to know what numbers they're given at them are accurate or not? Because it very well could be completely inaccurate, and no one cares, and they just pass it all up the line, even from the most gross foundation. So the idea of a growing nation may not be true. Anyway, it's hard. That's the thing, is it's hard to truly say. It also indicates that the United States is still far short of cleaning up its water supply. I think we've done a pretty dang good job. While industry in the United States has, quote, while industry in the United States has been forced to comply with tough discharge standards because of the Clean Water Act of 1972, and while the result has been a marked improvement in water quality nationwide, still more than 1/3 of our rivers and almost half of our lakes do not yet meet the federal standards. That was from that same article, The Big Thirst in 94. I don't know. Do we still have that problem? I think locally in different places, sure, but I don't know. I'm living in Utah is weird because there's a lot of things where we're actually really darn clean compared to a lot of other places. So I don't know about the rest of the nations. And yet, even here, there's times and places where we're not as clean. So, gotta shrug my shoulders. But the problem is far worse on the international scene, particularly in third world nations, where the problem centers in the elemental dangers of dung smoke and diarrhea. Quote, according to the World Health Organization last year, 4 million third world children under the age of 5 died from acute respiratory disease brought on, in most cases, by air pollution. This is about as many people of all ages who died of all causes that year in the United States and the European Union combined. In the third world, polluted air is more than matched by polluted water. Some 1 billion people lack access to drinking water that meets the crudest safety standards. UNICEF reports that 3.8 million developing world children under the age of 5 died last year from diarrheal disease caused mostly by impure drinking water. In the West, diarrheal deaths are practically unknown. In the developing world, diarrhea kills far more people than cancer. That's from, forget PCB's Radon Alar, the world's greatest environmental dangers during our dung, smoke, and dirty water. That is September of 1994. Of the magazine, New York Times magazine. So, but this is true. And at the same time, there's a lot to be grateful for because of countries vying for befriending these third world nations and pouring tons of money into it, for better or for worse. Some of the better things that they have done is poured money into the infrastructure for getting clean water, and more importantly, getting energy to them. The problem is that they were trying to skip the most basic energy steps and go straight for things like wind and solar. They have zero infrastructure to upkeep those kinds of power. So there's a wonderful book called Apocalypse Never. It is written by this bleeding heart environmentalist who absolutely was one of those people that is like, we're all going to die. It's the world's problem. Yeah, there's all this pollution, etc. He actually dug down into the science. And then he realized, well, dang, they're right. The way to do this is you take people up through the proper kind of methods of gaining more and more civilization. You can't skip to coal, or you can't skip coal and then go straight to solar and wind. Those are very diffuse ways of giving them power. But if you actually get coal power plants, okay, yeah, it sucks, it's dirty, but it's a heck of a lot cleaner than dung smoke. And then followed by which, okay, now that they've got coal and they can grow off of that and build off of that, then let's get them to liquid petroleum. Let's do oil. Okay, that's a step above coal. Great. You're cleaning up the air, you're giving them more power. All right? Then let's do gas, the gas-powered ones. the natural gas power plants. That's what's next. And so when you give them energy in the natural way of technology, they can build infrastructure at each step, have reliable power, and go from there. And then he, of course, recommends that the diffuse power sources, which take up all sorts of resources environmentally, is a very bad idea. But instead, you should go to things like nuclear power if you can, or at least stick with oil and natural gas, especially natural gas, because each step is cleaner than the last, delivers more power, and is more energy dense. And so that's why nuclear is the best, because it's ultimately one of the cleanest, but it has a lot to demand of the infrastructure. All right, so Apocalypse Never, great book, explains why don't use diffuse energy sources. You can lift people out of poverty and issues. And so we've been seeing that despite everyone warning about, we're all going to die because we don't have enough water, well, you can. Are you going to be reading the book, Jinji? All right. Let me continue. The burgeoning population growth is bringing forth continuing warnings of future shortages. Many biologists who see the world as a finite system, which is debatable, I really don't like that worldview, they view the world as a finite system able to support finite numbers, warn that the 10 billion people who the United Nations projects will live on the planet in 2050 will strain water and soil and other resources to the breaking point, causing horrific environmental damage, widespread hunger, and global misery. That is, Can More Equal Better? Science, September 12, 1994. Again, they warned about an apocalypse of horse dung in New York. Oh, until the car was invented. They're warning us about population until, oh wait, our population is starting to plateau. Naturally. The World Watch Institute warns that by 2030, the world will have only enough food to feed everyone at the level of an Indian peasant on average. Again, this is from Newsweek in September of 1994. This is the same stupid fear-mongering. Other scientists warn that to bring the average third world diet to a level comparable with that currently found in the developed world, or to have 10,000 gross calories per day, food production would have to surge by 430%. Providing a diet equivalent to a first world diet in 1990 would require that each hectare increase its yield more than 6 times. Such an event in the developing world must be considered virtually impossible, barring a major breakthrough in biotechnology of food production, which is Can the Growing Human Population Feed Itself? Scientific American, March 94. This is the crap that I grew up with. I grew up in the 90s. This is the stuff that they were putting out. It's an echo from back in the time in the 70s. You want a blast from the past? Go watch Saturday's Warriors, okay? And Saturday's Warriors, there's a song about the growing up teenagers are singing that zero population is the answer, my friend, and it's just moronic. Really is, because frankly, we always have breakthroughs, we always adapt. People go to where they can thrive. So you might have constraints, you might make this all up in your head by running the numbers, but look at the facts. Either people will buckle down and survive, or they will move to someplace else, or they won't thrive. But it won't be this big calamity, it'll be that particular section that is hit the hardest. So I'm sorry, I'm really chafing at this crap. Because, well, barring major breakthrough, yeah, we've done it. Not only had we done it a long time ago, but it has to do with distribution to these third world countries. We're helping these third world countries grow more stuff. And oh, lo and behold, they started getting technology. Why? Because companies and countries found it profitable to lend and teach and help grow these technologies in these places. The precarious state of the world's food supply brings the warning of scientists that human numbers are all on a collision course with massive famines. Please, I I strongly disagree with this. If humanity fails to act, nature will end the population explosion for us in very unpleasant ways, well before 10 billion is reached. Scientific American of March 1994. But the central focus of resource scarcity remains the growing lack of water, which occasions other scientists' warning that resource scarcity in the next century will lead to brutal wars, many over the most important fluid of the 21st. Love you, dearie. Don't hurt yourself on the way out. The resource scarcity in the next century will lead to brutal wars, many over the most important fluid of the 21st century, water. The Big Thirst, again, March 20 of Commonweal, March 25th, 94. Obviously, the growing threat of water scarcity as a danger to the world peace is a matter of grave concern. Okay, we're ending there. Next is an earthquake in America, because, frankly, my head's going to explode with how stupid those articles are. I do not, look, I'm not going to blame the author for trying to draw, he's trying to find how are these prophecies going to be fulfilled. And he's drawing from all the fear-mongering that was at that day. This is my problem with chasing after prophecies, when people go down the fear-monger path. Because, frankly, it's been a while since 1994, and we're all still doing just fine. And we're even longer from the 1970s, and we're just fine. Just go back and look at all the environmental predictions, and all the, oh, we're going to starve, and oh, we're going to be dehydrated to death. I just, like, fear-mongering through these means is stupid, with 2 O's. It's just, you want to know what causes famine? War. You want to know what causes disease and pollution? War. When infrastructure fails, when there are revolutions, and people aren't able to do their jobs of cleaning the water, of making the food, of distributing the food, that's what causes these things. War. You want all of that? War. Have war, and it will do everything for you. Sorry. As you can tell, I'm quite passionate about this, because I really hate the fear-mongering. During peace times, we adapt. Whether that's through immigration, adaptation, or the specific parts that are hit the hardest not thriving. But frankly, I find it, in the name of alarmism, great damage has occurred, both economically and physically, to the nations and peoples of the world. Lots of people will sit there and pat themselves on the back, or calm themselves, or give themselves accolades, be self-righteous over the idea that I'm doing what's right. I'm giving these third world people the ability to have power with solar and wind. But the problem is, that is the most diffuse source of energy that there can be. And it's not reliable, because it's dependent on how is the wind blowing, how is the sun shining. And even over time, those technologies will wear down. Do they have the infrastructure to replace it? And then it takes up so much land, and it takes up so much, it destroys their environment. Read Apocalypse Never, and you'll understand. Like I said, bleeding heart environmentalist faced the absolute facts and says, frankly, if we want to solve these problems, have energy density. The more dense that you can find energy, the better. Hence, nuclear is awesome. But not everyone's going to have nuclear. So start with coal, then go to oil, then go to natural gas. Each one is cleaner than the rest next, and provides more energy. And it's always reliable. And then if you can, ultimately, if you can do hydropower, great. Not everyone can. Not everyone has big running rivers to be able to dam up and use the power from. Okay, so fear-mongering through talking about water, food, environment. I understand that those are problems. I will not deny that. But throwing your hands up and screaming the sky is falling alarmism over it of we're all gonna die? Dumb. Super dumb. You want to take care of that. You want to clean up the environment. You want to have better sanitation. So what we should do is help export that technology to the places that need it the most. That way the rivers can be cleaned up. That way the waste areas can be cleaned up. You go think of how well we take care of our waste in America with our landfills, with our water treatment plants, with so much. It is incredible. You go to these third world nations where they just throw it out there in these heaps. It's awful. But again, that's not all these, it's not everywhere. Because we have been exporting that technology. We have been trying to help out. In New York, they're trying to regrow the oyster beds. It was a passion project. So there is absolutely a place for the bleeding heart environmentalists, the ones that actually get things done. Bleeding heart environmentalists came out and said, hey, the harbors of New York used to be really clean and clear, and these oysters used to be everywhere. It was like New York was an oyster town. It was like just go down to any vendor on the street and they buy oysters for the penny and eat them and then be off on your way. They decimated them. The New York harbors have been nasty after that. And they said, hey, what if we reintroduce these oysters and keep it going? Because they filter a crap ton of water real quick. And they've been doing that, and it's working. That is the practical bleeding heart environmentalism that we need. That's the stuff that people should be engaged in. But fear-mongering, waving your hands and saying, just give us money, those are the grifters off the people that actually do something that bother the crap out of me. The people who actually, there was one guy who decided, I need to start growing a rooftop garden for this one particular butterfly. He saved that one butterfly by his own individual actions and has encouraged others to do so. So is there a spot for bleeding heart environmentalism? Absolutely. And I encourage it, but not alarmism. Not in the slightest. I find it, frankly, not only ridiculous, but in some ways, my visceral reaction is I want to say it's cowardly, because you're what? You're virtue signaling. You're saying, I'm virtuous because I'm bringing this to everyone's attention. But is anything actually being done? No. In fact, most of the time, they advocate for things that make things worse. Why? Because they're not boots on the ground actually getting the solution going. And then you also have to be careful about implementation, because even those people who do try to implement solutions, depends on the solution. Sometimes the solutions they give are worse than what they're already living with. Again, like I said, trying to skip technology to get to green energy, which is really technically worse for the environment overall. Again, the land use on that stuff is just horrific. It's not good. Anyway, so I chafe at the articles in there, but I will not, the prophecies, when you actually get down to the prophecies, all of those, fine, no problem. You want war, you want calamities, you want people dying of thirst, you want people, etc. Just have war. Just have war. You'll get all that in spades. And so, revolutions, wars, that'll do it. Anyways, so uplifting, right? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you understand that it's not all doom and gloom. I know that obviously that's what we love to focus on, but I would say that it's a strong possibility that you can have a lot of these prophecies fulfilled without us noticing until it really does come to the calamitous parts. And when we're doing our best to do what's right, we'll be okay. Because whether we are caught up in it, we can rest from our cares. Or whether we're doing what's right and we'll continue on, we'll do okay. And that way, there's nothing to worry about. The big thing is to be aware. The big thing is to prepare, especially spiritually. And you just ask what you can do. Or if it's something that's bothering your mind, maybe ask the Lord. Because often if something's really on your mind, he'll help guide and direct you. Just don't go to extremes. Anyways, much love. May the Spirit of God be with you to guide you. We'll see you.